Hey everyone, Pastor Brian here. So glad that you guys are tuning in with us this week. Glad that you made it. I hope you guys are doing well. We are wrapping up our series called What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. And this, to me, series has been really insightful and helpful. And I hope that it's been really good for you. But I want to ask you a question. What's the best prank you have ever been a part of? Now, when I was in college, my college roommates and I, sometimes we would prank each other. And the way that pranks work is you prank someone, but then there's usually retaliation, right? Like you got to prank them back. You usually don't let one prank slide. You have to respond. In fact, there was one time, one of my roommates, he was downstairs. He was watching a movie with his girlfriend, and they were hanging out. And so the rest of us, we all grabbed cans of silly string, and we ran downstairs, covered him with silly string, and then ran away. He was not so happy about that because he was trying to get some quality time with his girlfriend, and he looked kind of silly, and there was a mess. And he decided it was time to retaliate. Here's the thing with retaliation, though. Sometimes people retaliate like way stronger than what the initial wrongdoing or prank or whatever was, right? And this retaliation was a lot worse than just some silly string. What the guy that we pranked did is he took all of the bedding off of the bed of the guy that was kind of the ringleader for this prank, threw it in the bathtub, turned on the water, and just let it get soaking wet. And then he put it all back on his bed. So when my buddy got home from class and everything, he kind of noticed like the carpet under his bed was wet. I was like, what is going on? And then he realized his comforter, his sheets, his pillow, everything was soaked through, and it was gross and nasty, and he had to take care of it. It was this retaliation of a prank, and that's what we do sometimes, right? Like we mess with people, but then we retaliate. But sometimes, like I said, we take it too far. Sometimes in life, when people don't just prank us, but upset us, like in general, they make us mad, they tease us, they do something that hurts our feelings or bother us, our instinct a lot of times is to respond, to get revenge, to retaliate because of what has happened. That's what we want to see, right? If you watch baseball, you've probably seen some of this even in this past week. There's a team, the Houston Astros, they cheated and won a World Series a few years ago, and they've been caught cheating. And this only came out this past off season. And so some of the players, particularly players from the teams who got beat in the playoffs that had a chance to win the championship but lost because the other team cheated, they decided they were going to retaliate. And so there was a pitcher who threw like a 96 mile an hour fastball at a guy's head on the Houston Astros because he was a part of that team that cheated. Then the next batter came up and he threw and tried to hurt that guy too. It didn't end well, and both teams, almost got into a brawl, and that's our instinct, right? Sometimes we want to retaliate. We want to respond in anger when we feel like we have been wrong. We want payback, and usually, this is especially true when it comes for people that we're close with, right? Like we usually don't want payback when someone we don't care about gets wronged, or someone that we don't care what they think about us does wrong to us. I'm like, oh, whatever, you don't mean anything to me. When someone talks about us behind our back, we tend to want payback. When someone maybe flirts with our boyfriend or girlfriend, our instinct sometimes is to want payback. When someone doesn't invite us to hang out with the rest of our friends, we want payback. And in those moments where we've been hurt, whatever causes that hurt, that's our feeling. We want to retaliate. But like I said, the closer we are to that person, the more that I think we want payback. And payback can look like a number of things. Sometimes we want public payback. Like this is when we want to do to them what they did to us in an obvious way. We want everyone to know I got revenge. We want to, clap back loudly. Like we roast them, and we say just kidding. Sometimes we want to make it known. Sometimes we want passive payback, which is a lot more subtle. Maybe we make comments that aren't obviously hurtful, but could be interpreted that way, like a backhanded compliment. One of those comments like, oh, you look really nice for once. That for once carries a lot of hurt in it, because it implies that you never look very good, and then someone throws out for once in, and you took a compliment, you look really nice, and made it actually pretty hurtful. Maybe we subtweet people. Maybe like we respond sometimes in subtle or passive ways for payback. Other times we do imaginary payback. Like I'm probably the expert at doing the imaginary payback, which happens when I have an argument in my mind with somebody and they don't know it, but like I have these really witty, thoughtful comebacks. I'm like, yeah, take that. And like, I know exactly what to say after the moment my feelings got hurt, but I never really say it. I just hold on to it on the inside. Or maybe we get payback not through anything direct, but we just enjoy watching them fail. And that's how we tend to respond. Well, regardless, we've been talking about this guy named Joseph who has been through a heck of a lot of hurt and pain in his life in this series, but how he responds to all this stuff just blows my mind. And it really shows how when we follow God and are obedient to him, God can work through our pain and use it, but also it can transform the way that we process and understand it and the way that we respond and treat other people, particularly those that have hurt us. And we know as Christians, you've heard, like, we're supposed to love our enemies. Retaliation and anger and payback are not really what we're ever meant to be about, right? That's not the life that Jesus lived. It's not the life that we live. And it's not the life that our man Joseph lived that we're going to be talking about today. So as a quick recap, if you've missed some of this series, or just as a reminder, Joseph was the favorite in his family. He made a lot of his brothers upset. They sell him into slavery. Not so great. He ends up, because he's obedient to God, God has favor on him. He ends up becoming kind of powerful. Again, someone wrongs him, lies about him. He gets thrown in prison as a slave. Life is still really tough. And then we talked about the other week, Joseph actually interprets some dreams. Word gets out. The Pharaoh, the head honcho, the king of Egypt, finds out about this, invites David to interpret some of his dreams. Sorry, not David, Joseph to interpret some of his dreams, and goes from there to become basically the second in command of Egypt. He is a big, big deal. And today, what we're going to talk about is this encounter that he has with his brothers. His brothers, the people that started the snowball effect of bad things in his life, yeah, they get to meet. It's that moment where if you're reading the passage, we should be holding our breath like, ooh, it's about to go down. What is Joseph going to do? What's he going to say? How is he going to get payback on his brothers? Now that he's in charge, they're coming to him because there's a famine in their land. They're coming to beg for food, basically. And this is Joseph's chance just to be like, ha ha ha, suckers, like, let me show you who I am. And you got to remember, these people think he's probably dead. Like, they don't even think he's alive. They don't even recognize him when they see him. And so in Genesis chapter 42, we see this showdown of like the original hurt, the people that betrayed him, that were his family. What does Joseph do when he gets this chance? Let's read in Genesis 45. It says, then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants. He cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So now it's just Joseph and his brothers. No one else is there. Joseph knows that these are his brothers that are begging for food. His brothers don't realize that it's him. Okay. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. So again, once they realized, oh man, that Joseph's still alive, and now he has a position to really pay us back, to deny us food, to punish us, maybe to throw us into prison or to make us into slaves. Like, this was this, oh no, we're gonna see revenge happen moment. And here's where I want you to just pause and ask yourself, what would you do? Like, if you had all the power and the authority to get revenge and payback on someone, what would you do? Would you take it? Don't answer, just answer for yourself. As the story continues, Joseph asks his brothers, he basically calls them like, hey, come close to me, and you can just imagine the tension. And this is what he says. He says, I'm your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Isn't that crazy? Like he's saying, instead of like, oh man, yeah, I want to sit and have you feel the pain that I've felt for years because of you. Instead, he says, I'm your brother. I'm your brother. Don't be distressed. Crazy. I can only imagine that there's only one way that in that moment that Joseph doesn't just try to get revenge. And it had to have been, I think, that Joseph had already chosen to forgive his brothers before they ever showed up. In the years of him being a slave or being imprisoned or maybe, when he's second in command of Egypt, I don't know when, he had decided, you know what, I'm no longer going to hold them accountable for that action. Like I'm no longer going to hold that against them. That's God's thing to do. It's not my thing to do. And he was able to acknowledge their wrong and the hurt that they caused him without creating more hurt. And that's really interesting to me because so oftentimes when I'm upset or someone's hurt me, I want them to know just how much they've hurt me before I forgive them. And yet Joseph forgives them first. And so he's able to talk about, hey, yeah, you hurt me, but I don't want you to be upset. I don't want you to get stressed out. I don't want you to freak out. I've already forgiven you. And look, God's taken this bad thing and he's used it for good. And now I'm going to be able to use it for good for you guys and for my family who he still cares about and loves. And this is how it finishes. It says he kissed all of his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with him. You know what feels better than payback? Reconciliation. And this is where we see God do the impossible in relationships, to bring peace where there's been hurt, all because of forgiveness. And the bottom line for today is, when you don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback. When you don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback. When the relationships are messed up, when you're feeling tension, anger, frustration, bitterness, whatever it is towards somebody, people that maybe we even love and hold dear, pursue peace instead of payback. Sometimes we don't know how to fix a broken relationship. But I do know that if we lead with forgiveness, when that opens the door for reconciliation. It opens the door. I'm not saying it's always going to come. I'm saying we can always fix relationships if we try to be forgiving and kind. We can't control what someone else is going to do, but I do know we can look like Jesus and love like Jesus when we forgive and we seek peace and reconciliation rather than revenge or payback. When you pursue peace, you fight for that relationship and people get to see that. And when you pursue peace, you actually lay down your right or your choice to get revenge. And you let that go. And here's the funny thing. When we forgive people, we also are the ones that are free. We sort of think, oh, I'm letting them get off for the bad thing that they did. But the reality is it probably doesn't bother them that much. And even if it does, it's a burden to us to hold on to bitterness. But when we reconcile, when we forgive other people, we're the ones who are freed because we're no longer holding on to that hatred or that bitterness or that desire to get payback. And we can be at peace because we've chosen forgiveness. And the reality is, friends, we can pursue peace with people that have hurt us because God has done everything through the work of Jesus to have peace with you and me. We stand as forgiven people. We extend forgiveness because we've already received it. And because we have peace with God, it's possible for us to have peace with one another, even those that have hurt us deeply. So, when you're not sure what to do, pursue peace instead of payback. Thanks, guys.